All right. Welcome to the Charlie Paparelli Show. I'm Charlie Paparelli, and today we are going to be talking about moving from entrepreneur to philanthropist, from making money to giving it away. To be sure not to miss an episode, I ask you to go to paparelli.com and just submit your email. You'll receive notifications of when these interviews are taking place and being published, and you'll also, as a bonus, get my Tuesday morning blog. This show is all about entrepreneurs helping other entrepreneurs succeed. To this end, I interview leaders who have built very successful businesses, but also very successful lives. Today's guest is Greg Thompson. He is returning for part 3 of interviewing with me. I've never done a multiple deep interview like this, but Greg has some wonderful stories. And Greg is the founder of ThomCo, and which was a specialty commercial insurance brokerage. In part 1, when we spoke, he talked about his growth through acquisition and also his big lesson that he learned in business, which is people do, in fact, make the difference. In part 2, we discussed how he built his business over 20 plus years before he got to this magnificent exit that he's enjoyed. And now in part 3, we're going to be discussing how he moved from entrepreneur making money to philanthropist giving money, which is a very difficult transition for entrepreneurs. As you know, it's been a very difficult transition for me. Welcome, Greg, and thanks for joining me a third time. What'd you say? Third time's a charm. And you'll share your life with me and with the entrepreneurs in my audience. So thanks for being here.
Happy to be here, Charlie. Thank you for being willing to go 3 interviews with me. So,
man, you've got great stories, and I appreciate you setting aside the time to do this one here for us too, and sharing with my audience. I know it's going to be very helpful. I know it'd be helpful for me, and it will be for them too. When we talked in the other 2 interviews, there was 2 times that you kind of tipped your hand about how I think it was God, in fact, that you said actually opened your eyes to this idea of giving. You know, did I get that right? Tell me a little bit about that. Bring us back there, and that's where we'll start about this.
Well, in the most recent interview, Charlie, I talked about the embezzlement we went through, and there's no reason that we should have been able to survive that as a company. And not only did I survive that embezzlement, and it was a miraculous chain of events that I won't get into that caused that to happen, that I can only think has a spiritual source. Because there's no way to explain how we got out of the extremely deep hole we were in. At the same time, I also explained that my wife was just incredibly supportive, even though we were facing personal and corporate bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And I learned how important family and a spiritual life is as part of that. So when it came time after selling my company and having some money to do some substantial philanthropy, there was no question in our minds. But what a lot of the windfall from the sale of the company belonged to God and did not belong to us. Now, don't get me wrong. We spent some of it on us, and we put aside some money for my daughter. But there was the lion's share of it as we see it belongs to God.
Well, that's an interesting statements that you made there. But you make it sound like it was sort of an on and an off and then on. You make it like a switch went off. But I'm sure there was some learning that went. When you talked about, for those of you who didn't know, in the second part, we went very deeply, if you want to know, about the embezzlement that he went through. And you will understand what Greg is saying, which is these series of events took place thinking, I'm going to be personally, the business will be bankrupt, I'll be bankrupt, okay, as a family. And then a series of events happened that were truly miraculous. I mean, it was, how could that happen? And you survived, and not only survived, but went on for the next 12 years to just thrive, or 20 years almost, I guess it was. So when you got this, you come out of the embezzlement and you made this comment, you said, we just knew it couldn't have happened without God. So then, therefore, we knew he was in it. How did that change your view of, from making money to at some point you were going to be giving money away?
It changed everything. Like a lot of entrepreneurs, I spent decades building wealth and creating value in my company.
Uh-huh.
I was your classic entrepreneur, 80 hours a week, just weekends, everything. There at one point in time, I remember, working almost every weekend. And so I didn't really, up until the time we sold the company, I didn't spend much money or time or treasure on charity. And so,
because you're centered, entrepreneurs, we're centered on making money.
Absolutely.
That's what it's about, keeping ourselves alive, right? I mean, it's about positive cash flow. Keep going, keep growing. This is why it's so important to how can we move to, how did that transition start to take place? And then eventually it really took root, but it starts, just want to know what your thinking was during that time, you see? You could think back and get me there.
You're right. It doesn't happen overnight. And after selling the company, I knew we knew we wanted to do philanthropy, but we didn't really have any track record of doing it on any significant basis.
Why did you know you wanted to do philanthropy?
Well, I mean, just for the reasons I mentioned. I mean, God has blessed us in so many ways, and surviving the embezzlement, I really believe that surviving it and then selling the company for money that I never thought was possible. But
why didn't you do what other people do? And they just say, it was miraculous. God was in this on how he kind of got us past this bankruptcy and this thriving company with this great exit. He blessed us. We really worship and thank God for these blessings and stop there. Why all of a sudden you go to the next step, which is, this must mean I need to give money away.
I can't really explain it, Charlie, except to say that I felt, both of us felt overwhelmed with the same emotion, that it's time for us to start giving back. I worked my tail off to become far wealthier than I ever expected. Mm-hmm. And, that the reason that I think really the way we looked at it was God had a reason pulling us out of that disaster. And then, allowing us to succeed the way we did, and that he believed that we would be good stewards of that outcome.
So it's sort of like you just became convicted. He changed your heart is what he really did.
He changed our hearts, and we became convicted that he said, "Okay, buddy, I took care of you. Now it's time for you to take care of me and my people." And that's just the way we felt.
Now, were you, before this event took place, this embezzlement, you were making some money, obviously, and you were building your business. Were you philanthropic then? Were you what in the Bible it says, it says Jesus loves a cheerful giver. Were you and your wife that pre-embezzlement? You follow me?
No, we weren't. And either in terms of time or treasure. Of course, I didn't have the time. Entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I get the time thing. Yeah,
don't have the time. But as far as the treasure, we gave, but we never gave any significant amount of money. I mean, a big gift for us was like $1,000 or something. The type of giving we're doing now is on a whole different scale.
Isn't that something? So after the embezzlement, how did that conviction of now we're going to be giving our time and our treasure, and our talent, okay, we're going to get to that too, is how did that start to show itself post-embezzlement? Do you remember those very early stages?
Oh, yes. Well, I remember specifically right after the sale, started looking around for charities to become involved in. Because
that's after the sale.
Yes, after the sale.
I'm saying after the embezzlement.
No, after the embezzlement, I mean, we felt tremendous gratitude for surviving it. But we didn't really, to be honest, get on the philanthropic train until after we sold the company.
So from the embezzlement to the sale, how many years was that?
That was about 15 years.
15 years. So in those 15 years, you knew you should be giving, but you were still doing still doing sort of the big gifts were $1,000.
Yes.
So you didn't change your behavior.
No, we did not. No,
Okay, that's interesting. Why is that? Do you know as you look back?
I think it's just because the energy that you put into building a company is all consuming, and I just didn't think about it. To be honest, I come from a family that was not particularly philanthropic. I mean, my parents gave modest amounts of money to charity, but there was no, and certainly there was no time. They spent no time on charity, either one of them, in terms of their time. And so I didn't have that sort of model to sort of guide me as to, yes, you need to give back. I think
that's important. I think that is important. I didn't have the model either, right? So if things aren't modeled for us, changing behaviors is difficult because we have a script in our head on how we operate, right?
Yes.
So, but what's interesting to me about you is you saying my wife and I, after the post embezzlement, when we survived this thing, we were convicted that we should be giving. Yet for 15 years, you're saying nothing really changed.
Yeah.
Did I characterize that properly?
Well, yes. I don't think that after the embezzlement, of course, we felt huge gratitude for surviving it. We never expected to survive it the way we did.
Yeah.
And I think we felt gratitude, but I have to be honest, I don't think we were convicted at that moment in time that we needed to be given.
So you were grateful to God, but not convicted to give at that point.
We weren't convicted to give, to be honest.
Okay. Now I'm trying to get the sequence of events right. Okay. So then you go along being you and your wife sort of, oh, isn't this great? The business is now starting to grow and flourish. Our lifestyles are now being raised, right?
Yes.
Then you sell the business. What happened when you sold the business and got more money than you ever dreamed you would ever get?
When that happened, a couple of things were going on that I think helped influence us. Is that the time we got this huge amount of money, and we thought, we need to do something. We need to give back. This is going to give us a vehicle, give back, and it's more money than we need. We live a comfortable lifestyle, but neither one of us is particularly, focused on living a huge fancy lifestyle. We like being comfortable. So we knew we had more money than we needed. And so we felt grateful for the sale and for everything we'd been through. So we were convicted that, yes, we needed to give back, both with time and with treasure. But simultaneous with this, strangely enough, we were going through a period of time with our daughter where she was sinking into addiction. And it was a very hard time for us. And I think that suffering through that somehow made us perhaps, I think, definitely more compassionate with what others go through.
This happened simultaneously around the sale?
And it was starting to happen about the time we sold the company, and it got...
So the highlight of your life you also had the low light of your life.
Yes. It was very strange. Suddenly you wake up and you have this flow of money, and yet you're sad because the only child that you have is struggling, is succumbing to addiction. And so it was a very conflicting feeling at the time. And I think that for some reason, suffering through that made us more compassionate about what others suffer through that we don't even know about.
Yeah.
And it spurred us. I think we would have been inclined towards charity, giving and time anyway, but I think that accelerated.
So what happened during that time with this sort of, because it seems like this was that her beginning to get into addiction was a catalyst also for the giving.
Yes.
I would think. Yeah. So how did that all come about? Because one of the things that's difficult, I think, for entrepreneurs is like, well, how do you even get started? How do you do this? Right. It's, so what happened?
Well, I started looking, for opportunities because one thing about having been an entrepreneur and a CEO, the one thing that's common across the board is that we're all kind of control freaks. Okay. So I wasn't just wanting to give money to somebody to do a nonprofit, I wanted to be involved in that nonprofit. And I also wanted to have a big impact. I didn't want to just give a little money here, a little money there. I wanted to have a big impact, but I wanted to believe in what I was going to be involved in and be a part of it. And also I wanted to use the skills that I had developed as an entrepreneur to help nonprofits.
It sounds like the beginnings of a strategy is what it sounds like.
Yes. Beginnings of a strategy is what I put it.
So tell me so you said big impact was one of the criteria.
Yeah.
And then use your skills, right?
Yes.
And what else? So what else came up during this time?
Well, what happened was shortly after the sale, I had a brother of mine who was on the board of Catholic Charities of Atlanta, and he needed to drop off because some other commitments he had. And he says, they really need somebody who has some money on that board. And so he said, I'm going to propose you to take my spot. And they agreed to it. And so I joined the board of Catholic Charities and became very much involved in their mission, and ultimately years later became chairman of the board. Wow. But that was the beginnings of executing a strategy to become involved in it, but to have an impact, both with time and my background, using it for that purpose.
So when you get into that Catholic, your brother recommends that you be a board member, they talk to you, obviously, the chairman probably talked to you, and then you join the board of Catholic Charities of Atlanta. How many people are on the board?
Approximately 15.
15 people. What was it like that first board meeting you walk in? What were your expectations as somebody who is sort of running his own show for almost 30 years? Was it 30 years you were running your company?
That's right.
30 years, right? So here you are, successful guy, lots of money, successful exit, everything's going your way. You walk into this nonprofit board meeting. Here I am. What was that like? Tell me about that first meeting.
It was a bit of a shock because I discovered that a lot of the people on that board were executives of various corporations in Atlanta. Uh-huh. And they were on that. What struck me is many of them, I don't think it's fair to say all of them, but many of them, it seemed like, were on that board to make it look good on their resume, to be able to say that they were involved in the community, whatever. But they'd be reading their emails on their phones in the middle of a board meeting. We had a executive director of the board who was ill-suited, a nice guy, but who was very ill-suited for the job. And it was obviously a pretty dysfunctional nonprofit organization. And of course, I couldn't just jump in there and change that, but I wanted to change that. And I did find another board member who was interested in changing how Catholic Charities did things. Why
did you do that? Why didn't you just walk into that board meeting once you sized everything up? Why didn't you just say, I don't know nonprofits. If this is what it is, I'm out of here. Okay. This isn't for me. Why did you stick around? Why did you decide I'm going to try to make this work? That's what you told me in not so many words. Why?
Yes. Because that's my style. I've never been the type of leader that just takes over immediately. I like to get the lay of the land. I like to see what's going on. I like to observe, and I don't just throw my weight around in an organization where I'm the new kid on the block. That's just not my style. But I did find another board member who was in charge of strategic planning, had just been put in charge of strategic planning committee. And I got on the committee with this lady, and she's a very sharp lady. And
you didn't know her before?
I did not know her before.
Okay,
and we started working.
A new relationship. Okay.
To do a strategic plan. And what happened pretty quickly, like 6 months into it, is that the executive board got rid of the director at the time. I don't like the way they did it, but actually it was the right move, but I don't like the way they executed it. I thought it was unnecessary. But anyway, they changed the executive director. And so that helped, provide a basis for myself and this lady and one other person on the strategic planning committee to start implementing some changes within the organization. Trying to get more grants, for example, was one of.
How do you deal with the resume builders? Because you got these people. You had the director, which is a really big problem, right? Then you got resume builders, and you say, "Look, this is take a step, drag 3 guys with me," right? So how do you deal with them?
There's not a whole lot you could do about it at the time, until they drop off, and you hope that that there was a committee that was searching for board members, and one of the parts of the strategic plan was to come up with a much more defined idea of what we wanted in a board member, what we expected from a board member. Because some of them wouldn't show up for half the meetings. I mean, it was pretty bad. So
that's what I mean. That's the problem with a lot of nonprofits. I always say that that's true, that there are resume builders. You want to have them on there you want to have this work on your resume so that in the next review, you look like you're sort of giving back to the community, so to speak, if you will.
Exactly.
Right. So, but it's difficult if you're intent on making big differences, making that change to have big impact. It's like having a company where three people are working hard and the other 7 aren't really doing much.
Yeah. And again, there's not a whole lot that she or I could do about that. But what we could do is try to influence the CEO at the time. I shouldn't say CEO, the executive director.
Uh-huh.
And we were making some progress, trying to get better board members, have a more defined board policy for recruiting board of directors and the type of people we wanted to have, that type of thing. That's
interesting because that goes back to your core value that you learned way back early in your business when during the embezzlement, which is people make the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you've got the wrong people, it makes for a big problem. One of the things that became apparent to me getting involved with this organization is that it's an organization that depends almost entirely on donations. Okay, they have some grants and some government grants and some private foundation grants, but most of their money comes from just pure donations. And yet we had very few major donors.
Oh my gosh.
So, ultimately, it became obvious to me that we had to change that. I mean, you can't have a sizable budget and have an impact on your local community, Catholic Charities, if you don't have the budget to do it.
How big was the budget? How big was how big was the bogey that you really needed to raise?
It was about $4 million at the time, and we were losing money. We weren't breaking even the way a good nonprofit should. We were losing money, and we had a very small foundation. Or I shouldn't say foundation. We had a small investment fund that we kept as sort of our safety money, and we were plowing into that. So we were going to run out of money sooner or later if we kept on doing.
You had to raise $4 million. How much money was raised when you were just burning money? How much money was the most that they ever raised? They didn't seem to raise the 4.
To be honest with you, Charlie, it was a while ago, almost 10 years, and so I couldn't tell you what that.
But it wasn't $4 million.
It wasn't $4 million. We were falling short of what we needed to raise to operate the organization.
So you are trying to raise $4 million and you don't have any big donors. So you're asking everybody to give $25.
Exactly.
That is a tough way to get to $4 million. Okay.
So I authored a huge push for us to get big donors. And so I came across from another board member who I recruited to join the board. He helped me find an organization that puts on 3-day retreats for nonprofit organizations, and at like 5-star resorts, and you invite high net worth individuals to come there. And in the course of that weekend, they had a great format for how you did this. The course of that week.
What's that guy's name, by the way?
Huh?
What's that guy's name? Do you remember?
Of the organization or the person?
Of that particular organization that puts on these things. I know him. Huh?
The organization is called Westfall. And they put on these 3 days.
And it's Westfall. What's his first name? I forgot.
I can't remember it off the top of my
I
head.
can't remember either, but yeah, he used to be with Walk Through the Bible, and that's what he started doing. He copied their model, and he built a business around that. But
He
yeah,
built a very successful business around
and he's
that.
done well with it. Yeah.
And so anyway, so then the board debated, well, it's going to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this, and we don't know that we're going to get the donors and blah, blah, blah. And then finally I just said, I'm going to pay for it. I said, I'll pay to host however many people, high net worth Catholics, we can get to this retreat, and I'll cover the bill. And so the board was, there was a lot of pushback, but at that point there was no pushback.
How much would you share with us? How big that check was?
That was $500,000.
You wrote $500,000. Prior to that $500,000 check, what was the biggest check that you ever wrote to a nonprofit?
Probably $10,000.
Yeah, which you say, well, that's pretty good, right? 10,000. I used to give 1,000. I'm giving 10x 1,000, so I'm doing well. What moved you to step in such a big way? Because that's crazy boldness. Okay.
The nature of an entrepreneur, if you see a problem, you want to solve that sucker. It's sort of the mindset, and it was a huge problem with this organization that we had not found a way to get big donors to step up. And, our board just got so caught up in the expense of hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this and not knowing what the payoff would be. And we're already, eating into what little money we have in the bank. And so I just said, look, end of story. I'll pay for it. Let's do this.
That must have had the whole board probably just sit back and go, okay, right? It also changed your credibility because of the level of commitment that I'll tell you, the resume builders were like shocked, okay, when they hear somebody step in and is that committed. That one thing changed the complexion of that board.
Well, I hope so. I think so.
Well, if I was on that board, I'd say, this is serious now. The expectations from me as a board member just went up, and I don't know how I'm going to handle that. Okay. So then tell me what happened. Now Westfall comes to you and says, so who are these very wealthy Catholics? Because you've got to build the list.
Absolutely. Westfall, of course, provides a lot of information on how to, figure out who's who and who, you have a list of people who've given. And you go through that list with Westfall's assistants, and you who do background checks to verify what somebody's net worth is. And of course, those are imperfect, but you get some idea of who you want to invite, because you want to invite the people who have capacity.
Yeah.
Come to the event. Ideally, you want to invite people with capacity who have a history of philanthropy, of significant philanthropy. And so we did that. We got through the list, and then we started calling people to invite them to come to the event.
You didn't send them an email or a letter. You first called them.
Yes. And there was huge pushback. Sorry? I called personally. I called people that I didn't even know.
How many people?
Well,
how many people are on the list?
There were hundreds. I can't remember the exact number. There were hundreds. And we had like 300, I think. And the problem I have is that I was raised Methodist. And so I had very few. I only became Catholic pretty well into my adulthood. So I didn't know that many Catholics, wealth or not a wealth. And so other people on the board knew wealthy Catholics, friends. And so they contacted them. I was the guy who did the blind calling.
Okay.
I would call people that I didn't even know, and cold calls. And I got, here I am, this successful entrepreneur, and I'm getting people, hanging up on me because they don't want to talk to me because they think I'm going to try to take some of their money. And so, I had to go through that hump.
What was the reaction on some of those calls?
A lot of the reaction is, look, I don't want to participate in this. I don't want to go to some fancy place to be entertained so you can ask me for a whole lot of money, and I don't want to have any part of this. Wow. And I got that reaction. Now, the one thing that we were able to argue is because we were paying for it, what I would say, and all of the other callers would say, is a generous donor has stepped up to pay for, so that, because a lot of them were saying, well, why doesn't Catholic Charity spend this money on doing their job instead of taking us to some fancy hotel?
Good question.
And so that's another reason I stepped up to pay for everything. So
what happened on some of these calls? You're making a pretty good offer. You're going to go to this really nice resort. It's going to be fully paid. All right. You just have to get there. All right. Outside of that, we're going to take care of everything. Soup to nuts. You don't have to worry about it. All right. We're picking up your room, everything. Pretty good offer on these cold calls. What are the things sometimes some of my experience when I've done fundraising, you're thinking people are going to join you. And I wound up getting some answers that I felt were actually demotivating and disappointing. Was there anything that just kind of stuck in your craw and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe this? Reactions from some of the people. You follow me?
Yeah, I mean, I was, well, for example, there was one thing that really bothered me, and that is that a lot of people would say, well, I'm mad at the Catholic Church because of the scandals, sex scandals. I said, well, wait a minute. We don't have a priest on our staff. They're all social workers. They're all helping make a difference. I said, we're building a positive image for the Catholic community by doing this. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, the Archbishop is probably running this whole show, and I just don't want to have. I said, no. I mean, the Archbishop shows up to about 1 out of every 4 of our meetings, mm-hmm. and sits there, doesn't say anything, and then walks out. I said, it's a volunteer board of Catholics. We are building a positive image in the Catholic community, and it's social workers who are making a difference. I said, why wouldn't you support that? And they would just still rant and rave about the Catholic Church and anything. And they would assume also that because we had the name Catholic in it, that the church was supporting us, and we got maybe 10% of our money from the diocese. So again, that was just frustrating for me, that people were so angry and so unwilling. Many people were unwilling to listen to what we had to offer.
Well, when you did but then there were those other calls that worked, where They said, sure, I'll come. What did those people say?
Well, I happened to, I got lucky a couple of times. And in particular, I was able to get hold of a Catholic guy who really had been very active in doing fundraising for his parish, and get him not only to come to the meeting, which he did, but ultimately he became a board member. He became a stupendous board member. I told the board that when I left that my number one accomplishment was recruiting him, and he was great, and we just hit it off from day one over the phone, and he became he helped us get a huge grant that we wouldn't have gotten without him. And so that was a great victory. So there were some victories out there, but I mean, there's a lot of doors slammed, and a lot of it's just people not wanting to, wealth gets solicited all the time for charity. And the second they hear that you're with a charity, they don't want to hear anything else. Right.
So what happened when you heard how much it was going to cost for this Westfall high-end convention, and everybody's saying, well, we shouldn't be spending money on stuff like that. In your mind, you said, well, I'll write the check for it. Did you just tell them right then and there? Did you go home to your wife and discuss it with her and then come back to the board? Or how did that work?
I did discuss it with my wife. That type of gift, of course, I'm going to discuss it with her. But she was fully supportive.
She had no hesitation.
No hesitation whatsoever.
And how about you when you had rethought what you had initially thought, which is I'll write that check? Did you ever second guess it before you wrote the check?
It's funny. As an entrepreneur, you learn to embrace your decisions even when they don't turn out well. Yeah. So I was full speed ahead. What's interesting, Charlie, is that the first meeting we had wasn't that successful. So we only had like 20 couples show up.
And that's a long meeting, yeah.
We were hoping to get at least 50, and we only got 20. And we raised less money than I put into it. So we only raised like, $300,000 or $400,000 out of it. And so it was a big disappointment, and Westfall Been Quoting does these large numbers. What I think was part of the problem is, and I don't want to get into this in a lot of detail, but there's a lot of data that shows that Catholics, for whatever reason, tend to be less charitably oriented than Protestants. And I don't know why that is, but apparently it's true. But anyway, what happened was we kept doing it. And now this year, we're going to have our 5th event in November at a 5-star resort. And this time we're putting up $750,000 because it's more people. We have recruited. We have absolutely had an incredible success. We've recruited like 80 couples to come.
When did it change? So the first one, you put up $500,000 and you come up 100,000 short or so, right, in the fundraising to even get to break even.
I covered all the costs. So basically, we ended up taking home maybe $300,000 or $400,000.
Okay, but you put up $500,000 and they took home $300,000. So those guys that are sitting on the board said, "Well, why didn't he just give the $500,000? We would have been better off, right? Instead of spending it on a big party or a conference, if you will." So then you got this now you're going to do it again or think about doing it again. Now you got these people, they've got pretty good data to say, we shouldn't do this again. If you're willing to give that much money, Mr. Thompson, then just write a check for $500,000.
No, nobody said that, and you think they might have, but nobody said that. Maybe it's because they just didn't want to cross, their biggest donor. I don't know, but
what
I was just
in the second one. How much did you put up? Did you put it up again?
We raised like $1.5 million.
Did you put up $500,000 again?
Put up $500,000 again.
You did it again.
I did it again because I believed in it. I believed that what Westfall was doing would ultimately succeed, and we will this year. I will be shocked if we don't walk away with millions. The type of people we have coming, see, a lot of the people who are coming have already been to one of these. About half the people that will be coming this year have been to another one. And what the thing is hard to get people to come, but after they come, they love it. They absolutely, our post-event reviews are off the charts because people just love it. It's a combination. We have Catholic speakers who leave you on the edge of your chair. We have a band that comes in and sings Christian music.
Yeah.
We have top flight entertainment. We have great dinners and meals, and we have mass every day. And the Archbishop comes in on Sunday, the last day, and does mass for the entire group. But the other
thing that happens is it starts building a community of givers.
Exactly.
They like being around each other. They're all in it together, right?
You hit the nail on the head. My goal always was we need a community of wealthy people to support our cause because wealthy people bring in other wealthy people. They may or may not, their friends may or may not come to one of our events, but they will find out and they will be interested and they can come to other much more casual events that we have in the course of the year.
Absolutely.
And so you kind of build that community and that was my focus. And even though there was maybe some pushback the first year, I just believed that we were on the right track.
Did you always? So you wrote a $500,000 check for the first event, $500,000 for the second event. Did you continue to fund the future events even after they started to push? You did.
Done 4, and we funded all 4 of them. 2 of them we funded at $500,000, one at $600,000, and then the last one at $750,000, and this one will be $750,000.
That's some serious giving there, Greg.
Well, it's some serious giving, but I think everybody is really excited on the board and in the organization is really excited about what it's accomplished, and it accomplished more than what the money is. I'm just telling you.
I'm not questioning any of that. What's interesting to me now. I kind of take it off of Catholic Charities and what you did, and take it back to you personally, you and your wife, and to say you go from giving I say this about myself. If I wrote a check for $250 to Red Cross, I want to tell everybody about it, before I got into philanthropy, right? Like you're saying, $1,000 was a big thing. You went from 1,000 maybe to 10,000 on a couple of gifts to all of a sudden you are writing, in effect, millions of dollars, and leading this thing. I just wonder, what caused that huge change in becoming so generous, so convicted in it. It's because it's like I can understand the 10, $500,000. I'll even buy that one time, but you just keep going. Okay. So what is it that, was there anything, there was any sort of, God speaking to you, or was it, I know you're not motivated because you want to be famous. You've just never lived that kind of life. Okay. That's not in your background. So can you explain it even? I can't answer the question properly. You know where I'm trying to get to.
I know where you're going. I think it was just God speaking to the both of us that we got money that we don't need a yacht. We don't need a private airplane. We're just not that kind of people. That's not how we live. It's not how we want to live. And so why do that when you can have so much positive impact? And the payback is to see what it does, what it accomplishes.
Yeah.
In this case, for an organization and an effort. The wonderful thing about Catholic Charities is their primary focus is to raise people above the poverty level sustainably. They're not about just giving stuff away. They're about helping people who are below the poverty level get above it and be able to do it on their
hand up kind of charity.
Not a handout. Yeah. That's our motto.
Oh,
and so that's really exciting. To be able to do that. I think God spoke to us and said, I've rocked your world in a very positive way. Now it's time for you to try to rock some other people's worlds.
So did you and your wife ever have a discussion? I have a friend that he was always big on asking the question, how much is enough? And I found out where the question came from. It was somebody asking Rockefeller during the real go-go oil days of the Rockefellers, and they asked him, the original Rockefeller, they said, how much is enough? Look at how much money you have. And his answer was $1 more. In other words, you never have enough. But it's interesting. Did you and your wife ever have that discussion and come to a conclusion that says, I could answer the question, this is how much is enough?
We never had that discussion.
Oh, really?
Because I think that in building my company, looking back on it, my real motivation, I wanted to make some money and have some nice things. But I really think my motivation in building that company was to build a great company. Just the journey of building a great company, of working with people to accomplish something extraordinary.
Yeah.
I really think that was my primary motivation. I won't say it was my only motivation. I like having, cash in my pocket like anybody, but I really think that was my primary motivation. So when it turned out far better than I ever expected, then, I had a surplus and God directed what we need to do with that surplus.
So when you say surplus, that means it's a surplus above some amount of money. You see what I'm saying?
We've never defined it. We've never defined
that. Okay.
We can't spend in our lifetimes given our lifestyle.
Yeah. So when you didn't really increase your lifestyle. One of the things that's unique is that you came into how old were you when you sold the business?
I was, good question. I think I was 61.
Okay. Now, for those, let's say, last 10 years of the business, you must have been taking in some pretty dramatic income, I would think.
Taking in good income, very good income, but a lot of it we were plowing back into the company because the company was doing really well, and we started doing acquisitions, which requires you can borrow, but you have to have a certain amount of money to put up for that, and also we were doing a lot of infrastructure build, IT in particular, and so. Yeah, it was making good good, comfortable income, but a lot of it, the profit.
Did you increase your lifestyle during that time as the business started to move?
Absolutely. I mean, once we started making, I'd say the last, 8 years, we were making a pretty handsome profit in the company. I increased the lifestyle, nicer cars, a second home.
What happened then when you cash out and this, as God would say, he says in Malachi, trust me, if you give me this money, I'll open the windows of heaven. Okay. And I will pour out my material blessings on you. Well, I'll pour out money on you. Okay. So don't cheat me is what he says in Malachi 3:10, I think it is. But it seems that by time you sold, you had even with all this money that came in, you already had an established lifestyle.
Yes.
In other words, you weren't wanting for something else.
No.
Is that true?
That's very true. I mean, Now we did, we did our second home. We sold it and built a new one after the sale that we could not have afforded without the sale. So we spent some of it. I'm not, no doubt about it. It did. The sale did up our lifestyle a little further. We have a house.
Yachts. You didn't move to boats and planes.
But we didn't move to boats and planes. We have a house manager to manage the two homes, and so that's a luxury very few people have. But we didn't go to the boats and planes. I mean, we just didn't. We didn't do silly money, and we didn't go to the Ferraris and the Maseratis.
So you don't have a garage with 15 cars in it or anything like that?
No. We have 3 cars, very nice cars, but that's all we need. So So then you get into a situation where you start becoming a big giver. You wrote that first $500,000 check. That puts you on the radar of quite a few people. Yes.
All right. All of a sudden it's like, oh, you need money to some nonprofit. Your name is going to come up. How did all that start to work for you? I know you're on the board of Catholic Charities, okay,
right,
of Atlanta, but what about when more people came to you? How did you deal with that? Now you were one of the, it's like you said, the rich guys always get hit up for money, right? Now you were one of those guys. You raised your head up and everybody could see you. So how did those discussions go? And how did you and your wife start deciding beyond Catholic Charities? Or maybe you didn't. I don't know.
It's funny, Charlie. For some reason, we didn't get on the radar that badly.
Okay.
I have not been approached by that many people, even to date, about giving. And I don't know why that's true, but somehow we managed to stay below the radar. And we've given to a lot of other organizations significantly and have become involved in them. But how did
you choose that? First of all, I want to say, if anybody's a nonprofit listening to this thing, shame on you that you don't know who these wealthy individuals are, and you should be targeting them. Okay.
Absolutely. Because
it's not that they don't want to give. It's that you're not getting to them and even asking, okay, giving them the opportunity to give. And that really is, that's an indictment against some of these nonprofits. Like you said, when you joined the board, no one was doing that. There were no big donors.
And we were failing as a result. It wasn't that we weren't, reasonably efficient with the money we had, but we were failing because in the fundraising aspect. But to answer your question about how you get involved in all these charities when you're not being approached, is your charities find you. If you're looking for it, I started asking people. Okay, so I belong to the CEO group. I mentioned that to you before, Vistage. So I started asking a lot of my buddies in Vistage, what charities are you involved in, or have you heard of any charities that you think are particularly interesting? And I started asking around.
Yeah.
I started a donor advised fund with the National Christian Foundation, and occasionally the director, he doesn't want to, overplay his hand, but occasionally he'll come to me with something and say, you might want to take a look at this.
Right.
He doesn't do it very often, but because he's respectful, he doesn't want to be a nuisance. But he brought one to me that was an incredible one that I've been involved in. One of the things that Mary and I do a lot of is we do matching. We have learned the power of matching. So what we will do is we'll say, look, we're up to X amount of dollars, we'll match any donors that come in on a particular campaign.
Oh, so you set the match. Okay. Not that you will give to a match. Okay.
We won't give unless somebody puts up money, but it's a way to get other people involved. So we found this charity that does an incredible job of providing clean water, inexpensive clean water to the rural areas in the Dominican Republic. And people don't realize the Dominican Republic is just as poor as Haiti once you get beyond the tourist ring.
I didn't know that.
And so it's changed a number of.
Well, who's the charity? Give them a little.
So I said, look, I'll match 50 cents on every new dollar that you can raise, that you didn't have before. I'll match 50 cents on the dollar. And it's had a huge impact on that charity.
Why after Catholic Charities, I'm sure that you put up a pretty good size match there. Okay. Why did that charity grab your heart? Why did that all of a sudden become a commitment for you and Mary?
Well, I was introduced to them by National Christian Foundation.
Okay.
And I met the guy, and it was obvious. The guy's an engineer who spent his entire career in water.
Who you're talking about? I give to them too. This is out of North Carolina or South Carolina?
They're in Atlanta. It's called Water at Work is the name of the charity.
Oh, Water at Work. Okay. No, I don't.
The guy is a hydration engineer, and he really came up with some really spectacular technology in a poor country to take dirty water and to turn it into clean water. And his case that he made to me was, look, let me show you the economic impact of what we're doing, because the reality is in extremely poor areas of the world, waterborne diseases cause huge economic problems because people are sick all the time. They can't work.
Yeah.
And it boils over into their economic world. And so he shared with me a lot of data in that regard. And so we match 50 cents on the dollar. We only give 50 cents for every new dollar that comes in. We give them about $100,000 a year, and it's totally rocked their world.
What was his total budget? Do you know?
I can't remember, but he was fundraising maybe a couple $100,000 a year. We basically doubled that.
Well, how did you decide how much money when you decided, okay, I really like this guy? He's got credibility through NCF because they've done their due diligence. How did you decide? How did you and Mary decide it would be $100,000 rather than $10,000? You follow me?
Well, it just we looked at their budget. We looked at what he was trying to do, areas within the country that he wanted to expand into where he wasn't reaching because he didn't have a plant in that area. And so we loved the model, and we said, okay, well, we just named a number. We'll up to $100,000. We will match 50 cents on the dollar.
That's great.
It's had a huge impact on their reach and how many people that they're providing clean water to. I had another situation. We were on vacation in Rwanda and to see the gorillas. And turns out that my wife's sister was very close to a priest in northern Rwanda who had a movement called the Secret of Peace. His goal was to promote peace and reconciliation, first of all, in Rwanda after that terrible genocide they had in the 90s, where 10% of the population was killed within 120 days. It was just insane. They killed like somewhere between 700 and 900,000 people within 120 days.
Their own people.
Now you can imagine in a country of 10 million people where you've wiped out 10% of the population, murdered 10% of the population, what type of trauma those people have as a result of it. This priest, who had lost a lot of his family in the genocide and managed to survive, basically was preaching reconciliation and healing. And he was so good. He got so good at it. He started going around the U.S. and Europe doing healing masses and having a huge impact on and miracles. Many, many miracles occurred with people who were healed physically and mentally. And so anyway, I met this priest. He's an amazing man. His personality reminded me of the Dalai Lama. I mean, just a very joyful man, even though he'd lost most of his family, mother and brothers and sisters in the genocide. And this man, I spent 3 days with him, and he showed us a piece of land where he wanted to build a church that would be a place that people would come to in Rwanda and throughout the world to seek healing and reconciliation. And he said, I want to build a church on this spot. And I said, well, Father, how old are you? He says, well, I'm 63. I said, I think we need to get this show on the road. I said, I tell you what, I'll put up $100,000 to start this church as a matching gift. If you can get, your donors to put up the other $100,000, I said, I'll match them. And is that enough for you to start building the foundation? He said, yes, that's enough. And so we did it on the spot, and the donors put the $100,000 in within 90 days.
How did you, one of the things you did with Catholic Charities is you got very engaged. Okay. How about these other charities, the water charity and now this Peace and Reconciliation Ministry in Rwanda? Were you highly engaged there, or were you more of a sort of a supportive donor? Well,
it varies. In the case of the water charity, I just went to their annual meeting in January of this year, and had really was very insightful. And I meet with them, have lunch with the director at least once or twice a year. But that's the extent of it. In the case of Father Ubald in Rwanda, I ended up being on the board. We created a board for the organization, and I'm still on the board of this called the Secret of Peace. I'm still on that board.
Were you the founding board member? I mean, are you the chairman?
No, I'm not the chairman.
Okay.
We have another person who's chairman who was closer to Ubald than I ever was.
I see.
But basically became part of that board, and I did a strategic plan for them. I moderated a strategic plan for them that we're currently executing. Unfortunately, Ubald died of COVID in the U.S. I guess it's a year and a half ago. But we're continuing on without him, trying to build his legacy and continuing the healing that he started in his country. But an amazing man. I'm just telling you, an amazing man.
You did something go ahead.
I'm just going to say, he ran in one of his missions for reconciliation. He went to the prisons in Rwanda, where a lot of the Hutus who had committed these atrocities were being held, and he had a deal where he would go with other Tutsis, the minority tribe, and they would go, and if any of those prisoners would ask for forgiveness, they would give it. And one day, a man came up to Father and said, "Father, I'm the man who ordered the murder of your mother. Can you forgive me?" And Father Ubald threw his arms around him. The two men cried together. And not only did he forgive that man on the spot, but he found out that man had 2 orphan children while he was in prison. And he found those children. He paid their school fees. This is Ubald. And he also made sure they had a home to live in, because they were virtually homeless, his 2 kids. And he did that for the man who ordered the murder of his father. And that is what you call true forgiveness. That is
what you call godly love. That's what it is. I mean, it's
godly love.
That's supernatural love. You don't do stuff like that as a man. No. That's a story.
So we built the church. By the way, we built the church. We weren't able to be there for the inauguration, but Mary's sister and our niece went to the inauguration of that church, which was about 2 years ago, which thank God Ubald was alive to be there for it. And so that church now,
true. Yeah.
It is. That church is now a location within Rwanda that thousands of people come to for healing. And it's a place they come to ponder and pray for the victims of the genocide and for their own healing of that trauma.
Wow. Those are some great stories. One of the things you hit on, I think, is important is when someone with money says, I really do want to give, to start flat-footed like that, you don't know where to go, right? I mean, there's charities everywhere there's nonprofits. All right. One of the things I like that you did is you started, and there's a couple places to start. One, I think, is maybe to say, these are the constituencies or activities I'm interested in. I mean, that's one strategic approach. The other is what you took, which is I just started asking people that I knew and respected what charities they're involved in. You know, what did you learn from that?
Well, I learned that that I was a bit of an outlier. Almost everybody had some type of charity that they either volunteered their time for, or that they gave, significant money. And it's different for everybody depending on what your budget is, but money that was significant to them. And it's something that I had never done. Mary and I had never really done. And so, and that inspired me all the more and say, look, these people are doing it and they don't even have the assets I have.
Yeah.
So they can't make as big an impact as I do.
True sacrificial giving, right? It makes a difference. Yeah. But was there any of those charities that you then supported because they were supporting them?
Yes. I think NCF, National Christian Foundation, has a fund. They make fees from doing these donor advice fund, and then they take some of that money and they give it back to charities. And they were giving some of their money to this charity, so I was impressed by that they were doing that. In another case, I got involved in a charity because one of my fellow CEOs in Vistage, I asked him about charity. He said, well, my wife has a cousin who's trying to do this social enterprise project in Haiti. So why don't you come to dinner? He's in town. They live in Haiti, but he's in town right now. Why don't you come to dinner tonight? So I went. Mary wasn't available, but I went to dinner at his house. And I met these people, and it began a long-term involvement in this social enterprise. We're building a strip mall in Haiti, in the second largest city in Haiti, Ghanaïve. It's been a nightmare. You can only imagine the last 4 years in Haiti have just been one nightmare after the other. Social unrest, lack of fossil fuel oil because of a corruption problem. I mean, the list just you could just the prime minister was so everything. But we are still moving forward with the project, and we should be able to open the store by the end of the year. It looks like a grocery store. We won't run the grocery store, but that will be our tenant. But we're doing some amazing things. We've got a crafts company.
Yeah, like the other one. Like we talk about that one there. You're talking about building a strip mall in a very, very dangerous place, if you will, or a place where things don't quite operate like they do in the United States, right? You got graft that you're going to have to deal with. You got lack of safety issues. There isn't public safety in those areas. You got all this stuff going on. How do you identify leaders of nonprofits that will be successful? I mean, you've seen some that you met some, I'm sure, that you go like this, right. Like this priest, he's for real. Okay. He's going to make a difference, and I want to get behind him. I'm sure you met some other nonprofit leaders that they talk a good game and you're like, I don't think so. What is it that you see in one and maybe what's missing in the other? What makes for a good nonprofit leader that real money can get behind, not the $25, donation?
It's a good question, Charlie. And to be perfectly honest, I've made some mistakes along the way in my giving.
Okay.
This project in Haiti was kind of a money hole, more so than it should be, because the guy who was running it, great guy, totally dedicated, but not a good business person. Mm. And so one of the things that I picked up on that pretty quickly, and I said, do you have an active board? And he says, what does that mean? He had a board, but they were a bunch of friends, and they sort of sit around and talk about the organization. And so he really needed somebody to acquaint him with good business practices. And so I helped him reform the board. and I was board chair for many years. I'm still on the board. I'm not board chair anymore. And he got a lot better, but I'm still saying he's still not in his best of days. He'll never be a great businessman. And I think that caused us to have a lot of problems that we might not otherwise have had.
So you say the money isn't being used efficiently?
Not in the beginning. I think it is now, but not in the beginning. But what we've learned to do with him is to sort of keep him from making certain types of decisions that we know he's just too gentle a guy. He's not.
So what is that you learned about choosing leaders, like from this experience?
From this experience, I learned that it's not enough that your heart be in the right place. You've also got to have a minimum skill set of running a business. And this guy didn't have it. He's much better under the controls we put in place, and we're making progress and we're having an impact there. But value for the money, the amount of money that we've put in close to $1 million, Mary and I over the years have put in close to $1 million. Could that $1 million have been used more effectively with another project? Yes, to be honest.
Are there other mistakes that you've made? As you said, we've made many mistakes as we're doing this, because we do. I mean, it's just like philanthropy is new to you, right? I mean, all of a sudden you're giving away real money. How do you not make mistakes? So you're never going to do it perfectly, So what other let's say landmines maybe that are out there that you can talk to entrepreneurs about that are moving to philanthropy, things to just watch out for, that mistakes that you've made that you say, learned on that one.
Yeah, I think the thing that's really important is that the people who are running that organization have a very clear goal in mind of what they're going to accomplish, how they're going to get there. And they've got to have a certain toughness. And one of the challenges in the nonprofit world is it attracts people who are lovely, God-loving people who you feel immediately attracted to because you can sense their commitment.
Yeah.
But if they don't have an organizational skill set, or you can't find somebody to work alongside them who has that piece, you're going to have trouble. And I learned it with the Haiti project. We sunk a lot of money into that, and we're having an impact, but we're not having as much impact as if we had somebody who was tougher and was just a little more business savvy.
One of the things that I've learned is that you find in these in developing countries like you're talking about here, is that the leader, as you call him, who has the commitment, who feels like they're called to serve this constituency, okay, whatever it might be, is they don't want Americans as part of the leadership. They think that it always has to be locals that are doing the leadership. Is that true?
That's frequently true. There's certainly a push for that. And the challenge is that take Haiti as an example. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. And there's a reason for it. There's terrible corruption, and the people, all they've known all their lives is a country where there is no rule of law as we know it. Okay, there is whoever's got the power, whoever's got the guns, whoever's got the money or the guns or both is the one who controls things.
Okay, and
so in that environment, people frequently have a victim mentality. I have no control over my life. One of our initiatives that I think is the best initiative that we have done in the Haiti project is we train young Haitians, how to think differently. And what we tell them, yes, there are things outside of your control, but there's a lot more under your control than you think. And if you do a good job for somebody, sooner or later they will recognize it, and they will do something for you. And if they don't, there's somebody else who probably will. That whole concept of where is the locus of control? And even in a terribly corrupt country like Haiti, if you're a hardworking person who believes in yourself, you can still do something with your life. It's harder than it is here, a whole lot harder, but it's possible. So what we in the Pro Lead program, we started with Americans doing the training, but we've got Haitians doing it now. They go out and train people how to think differently, how to believe in themselves, and how to show initiative. And things like, for example, Haitian workers, they don't understand the concept that I got to show up to work on time. They think of the boss as somebody who's trying to steal from them, and the boss thinks of them as somebody who's trying to steal from them. And that's the whole mentality. It's the whole. If you think about it, it comes from the fact that 200 years ago, Haiti was a slave state, and they rose up and they threw out the French. And in a slave world, you're either a perpetrator or you're a victim. And that's sort of the Haitian mentality still. Wow. 200 years later. So how do you break that? Well, you got to break the way people think, and they got to stop thinking of themselves as victims and thinking of themselves as somebody who has a certain amount of control over their lives, and they can change their lives. And we've had huge success. We even did a study that showed where people in our program who've been through our Pro Lead program, training program, and who haven't, similar socioeconomic groups, and how they're doing. And we've made a very strong case in our data that the income and the success of the people in the Pro Lead program is much better. And we've actually been so successful that we've gotten some of the local businesses to pay for their employees to be put through the Pro Lead program.
Isn't that great? Have you actually? So you've spent a lot of time down there yourself.
I went there almost every year for like 3 years in a row, and then it hit the fan, and I haven't been like the last 3 years at all.
But again, going back to what you said, is I want to have big impact. I don't want to give a small amount of money. I want a big amount of money. I want to use my skills. I want to be involved. And you've proven that you've done that in all cases, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, we have board meetings. We actually have a finance committee meeting every month. And we're going to do that with that organization. Much Ministries is what the umbrella organization is.
Oh, it is? Really?
Yeah.
It's called Much Ministries. Local. I didn't know that they were international.
Well, they're all their projects are in Haiti, but the 501(c) is in the United States. But we have 3 organizations. We're building a strip mall that we're leasing out space to vendors. We have Pro Lead, and then we have a crafts company where we're taking people from the poorest part of Ghana and called Jubilee, and we're training these women how to make crafts. And the amount of money they make is small money by our standards, but for them, it's a windfall that they wouldn't otherwise get. And
how do you go about when you say this guy that I had, and this was in the Dominican Republic, I think, where you said you were going to build that strip mall? Am I getting that right?
Well, no, it's Haiti.
That's Haiti.
Dominican Republic is waterwork.
That's waterworks. Okay, so this is Haiti. He didn't have the business skills. He's okay, but he never will have the business skills necessary. And you said we need to get a real board. So here you are in the Southeast, and you're going to try to help this guy build a real board for his organization. How do you even start that? Do you do it with locals? Do you do it with people that are donor? I mean, how does that? I wouldn't even know where to go with that. So help me.
It's a good question. You want to have people who are going to be tough on it. What I told him is you want to have people on your board that are going to stab you in the chest. People who are going to tell you what you need to hear, whether you want to hear it or not, because you need help. I knew that from the beginning. I knew this guy needed help. He needed people to tell him, what he needed to do. He needed to toughen up, and he needed to be a lot, because those people down there were fleecing him.
So were they locals that were this way, or were they Americans?
No, the locals down there were basically fleecing him. Because he's a soft touch. He's a great person. He's a former minister, Protestant minister, and just a wonderful, wonderful human being. but he was being taken advantage of down there. And so we had to toughen him up, and he needed a board to toughen him up. So who do you get on the board? First of all, you get good business people, but also we found a guy that he knew that had done a lot of consulting for small businesses in Haiti for free. Of course, he was a volunteer of another organization. But here's a guy he's American.
Oh, he's
got experience in Haiti. He ran his own company successfully and sold it. And also has experience working with Haitian business owners. Ideal to be on the board. I met a young guy who, well, I should say younger, middle-aged guy at a private equity meeting who was just dying to be involved in a project like this. I told him about the project. I got him involved. Well, he loved the ProLead thing, and he's the guy who went down to Haiti and did the survey to get us the data to prove that ProLead actually changes lives. And as a result of that, we've gotten grants for ProLead from some international organizations. So I recruited him at a private equity meeting. I ran across him. He's a financial analyst for a private equity fund. And so we just sort of pieced it together that way, just finding people who we needed a guy who had experience in running a strip mall. Well, one of my friends developed strip malls here in the Atlanta area. So I recruited him to get on the board to help us figure out how to negotiate the leases, how to negotiate with the our primary tenant.
Did he wind up having to go, and did the board have to go? I get on the board. Does that mean I have to go to Haiti? Did he go to Haiti?
Yes, he came to Haiti. Everybody went to Haiti until it got to the point that it was too dangerous to go.
Well, look at that. I mean, that involvement is spectacular. Have you ever gotten involved with a nonprofit and given substantially and then pulled out, said, can't do it? You know, it might have been early on, not, you know, so I'm thinking sort of like within a year kind of a turnaround, or maybe within a couple of years.
Well, you know,
and what was missing? You don't have to name one. It was just, and what was missing? What just shut you off? What got you excited, and then what shut you off?
Well, what got me excited, you know, usually is a mission that's engaging and compelling. Okay. And that is going to change people's lives. The challenge I had with one organization that I am pulling out of, I'm actually involved in it now, but I am pulling out of, is that we have a founder of the organization who really struggles with either not being involved at all or wanting to have their fingers in everything. In other words,
oh God.
You know, and so that is tough. Because, you know, what happened when I got involved, because I'm a take charge kind of guy, like most entrepreneurs. And so I started, you know, making some things happen. And then they just didn't want to be involved. I said, wait a minute, you know where all the skeletons are buried. You know, a lot of stuff that I don't know. I need you involved. And it's like she just sort of totally zoned out because somebody else was making some decisions. And then, you know, and then she was complaining about, you know, not feeling like her organization had been stolen from her. Well, I mean, that was never my goal. My goal was to help her realize the vision she had for the organization. But there are certain skills that I thought I could bring to the table that she didn't have. And there are certain things she does that I could never do. And it's just, she could somehow find that middle ground between not jumping out or having her hands on every single little decision.
Wow. So you just, at some point, you just say, I can't, I coached, I did my best, it's not working, I got to get out of here.
But I'm phasing out.
I can't have the impact. That's what you get to. I just can't have the impact that I thought we would have.
But I never walk away. I mean, I basically said my term, I'll be 3 years at the end of this year, which is the normal board term. And I'm going to drop off at the end of the 3 years. And I will do that. Said, if you need me for a project, I'm here. You know, but I can't remain on the board.
Do you continue to give to the organization?
I will continue to give depending on. I don't have any gifts that I've given recently, and I will not give unless I see value to it, and maybe I will at a future date.
All right. Did you ever actually sit down and write out sort of a giving strategy? You know, like if you go to the Gates Foundation, you know, they'll have a document that says, this is what we do, you know. Did you ever do that, or is it just sort of in your head? It seems like you want to, yeah. So I don't want to lead you on this one, you know. So did you ever put a strategy?
Is very simple. It's the classic. You said it earlier. I want to give people a hand up, but not a handout.
Okay.
And so I don't believe in soup kitchens, and I'm not against that. I mean, I'm happy that they're out there, but just giveaway programs just don't suit the way my mindset is. I want to impact positive people's lives, but I want them to be engaged in it. I just don't want to give stuff to people because
it has to result in economic impact is what you're really that is the high bar, right? At that point.
The Pro Lead project for me is perfect in Haiti because that's influencing people to helping people help themselves. And so, you know, and speaking of a giving strategy, I have codified it a little bit because one of the things that I've done is that when Mary and I pass, the lion's share of our estate will go to a giving fund that will be managed by my daughter and her cousins, my nieces and nephews. So basically I have sort of codified that the type of charities I want them to give to will be charities that are a hand up and not a handout.
Do they have to have a faith foundation?
They don't have to have a faith foundation. There's no requirement.
Okay.
But because all the money will be in National Christian Foundation, there are certain things that they will not give to, that allow them to give to.
Right.
If they're contrary to NCF policy. You know, there's certain things like, you know, some of the more extreme things that are going on. I won't enumerate them politically these days. They couldn't give to those kind of things.
How many kids do you have?
I have one daughter.
I
have quite a few nieces and nephews.
So I'm guessing that things went well getting out of addiction and getting to sobriety and all that. I'm hoping
she is sober now. I'm pleased to say, you know, I don't ever take it for granted. She is a difficult young adult because she is very impulsive, which is the nature of addicts. But she is making a living. She's holding a job down. She's paying not all of her bills, but most of her bills. And to me, that's a huge accomplishment, you know. And she's sober. So I'm proud of her for doing that. You know, I have to sort of measure her by a standard that's reasonable for her.
I get it.
And she's adopted, and she came from a situation of two addicts meeting while in treatment, and who had her as a child, and they weren't in a position to raise her, and we adopted her.
You got it.
So we're fighting a little bit with the genes we got to work with there, but she's made a lot of progress, and I'm proud of her for that.
That's wonderful. How have you you know, given who she is and how she's growing? How do you and Mary sort of involve her? Like you said, you're going to put up this giving fund, you know. Have you involved her or anybody else in your family in these projects that you're doing to kind of expose them to philanthropy and giving and all that?
Here's how we've done it. We've done it very specific. We give $50,000. We put $50,000 a year in a giving fund for my daughter and her cousins on my side of the family to manage. Because my side of the family, there's a lot more nieces and nephews. Only one niece and one nephew on my wife's side of the family. We give them $25,000 to manage every year. We have a meeting once a year. We share at that meeting. Mary and I share at that meeting all the charities we've given to in the course of the year and why. And they share the charities that they've given to in the course of the year. This is a training wheels version of what they will eventually do when they get the full fund when we pass. So we are trying to train them, but we don't force them to give to our charities.
Annually? Is that meeting annually or quarterly or what?
Annually.
Annual meeting.
We give them this money annually to give to charity. And they are dispensing that money. And at the end of the year, we're meeting together as a group, and they're telling us we gave to this charity and here's why. And we're telling them we gave to this charity and here's why. And we're sharing in a meeting with them.
Do you speak about talk about the amounts too?
Oh, yes. They talk about we gave $2,500 to this one. We gave $5,000 to this other. And here's why. And we do the same thing. We gave $750,000 to Catholic Charities this year for the retreat, and we gave $100,000 to Water at Work, et cetera, et cetera. And so we share information, and the whole idea is I never had anybody give me leadership about charity, but I got to tell you, being a philanthropist is the best job in the world. And I want them to have that experience, and I want to provide them the leadership that I didn't have. And I'm not complaining; my parents were lovely people, but I want them to have the leadership I didn't have, and I want them to understand how wonderful it is to be able to have a positive impact on other people's lives, and how much it adds to your life.
Do you ever get into a situation when you've done that with your daughter and nieces and nephews and things, where they had this money to give, that you get to the annual meeting and you find out that they gave it all away in the last 2 weeks in preparation for the meeting?
It's not been like that. They've been great.
So they're giving throughout the year.
Well, one thing we did is we created a document, in cooperation with them as to how this was going to work. And they agreed to meet 3 times a year. They agreed they wouldn't give more than X amount. I forget what the percentage is, maybe more than 10% of the annual fund to any one charity. We agreed on some parameters, okay? But essentially, they've taken it quite seriously, because I've explained to them, one day when we pass, you're going to be managing millions of dollars in charity. And they understand that it could easily be 8 figures, and it probably will be 8 figures that they'll be managing. And we're going to split it between the two sets of nieces and nephews, and they will be managing this money and having a much bigger impact.
Do they want to?
They have indicated, yes, we want to do it.
My gosh. What percentage, when you think about these are the type of things. I just saw a headline, I guess, is that Bill Gates's daughter, is this phenomenal horseman or whatever she is. She's in all these competitions, and the headline was, and she's just going to get a small percentage of his $115 billion in net worth. And I didn't read the article, but, my first thought was, yeah, any percentage is a big number. Okay, of $115 billion. So, not giving me numbers, how do you come up with the percentages on what to leave behind for the next generation, and then what the rest of which is going to be in this giving fund, as you talk about?
Right. Well,
how do you come to that? Because I think wealthy entrepreneurs, people have been successful. That's something they struggle with, and the easy answer is, just give it all to my kids, or whatever.
We struggled with that, of course. Our daughter is a spendthrift, and she's terrible with money. So she will not get a lump sum at her passing. Mm-hmm. Instead, my sister-in-law, who's much younger than my wife, would be the person to sort of dole out the money, but we made it very clear that we don't want her getting a lump sum.
Right.
She will get some assistance, but she will also be required to hold a job, and or if not a job, at least a significant volunteer position with a nonprofit, and the lifestyle she will be supported in is not a super fancy lifestyle. Okay, because we just believe that trust fund babies, 9 times out of 10, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
And we don't want our daughter, especially our daughter who's so bad with money, to be a trust fund baby. We think it would be a disaster.
Got it.
So we've made arrangements like that. So we've set aside in our wills, we will set aside a sum of millions of dollars. It represents probably about 15% of our estate.
I see.
That would support be that. And then once the sister-in-law passes, basically we have an organization set up that has instructions to continue that policy with her. And then if our daughter dies and there's a bunch of money left, it goes to all the nieces, the still living nieces and nephews.
I see. Okay.
So that's how we handled that. Something extraordinary happened this past year was we thought there was going to be tax law change, and we thought they were going to reduce the cap for estate
Right.
giving.
The exemption, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah, so the exemption. So what we did was we took the money that we were planning on, about $1 million per niece and nephew.
Yeah.
The money that we were going to give them at our passing, we thought we don't need this money now, and we gave it to them. Because we told them all, look, we would we really would like to see you enjoy this money while we're still living, rather than you get it at our passing. And furthermore, they're all doing really well, and they're mature young people who we thought wouldn't do something stupid with the money. And they've been, as best I can tell, they've been very smart to a person.
That's great.
So we gave $1 million to each one of our nieces and nephews. And I think that doing that also helped the charity project. It's kind of like, okay, I'm going to be in charge of all this charity, and maybe it's a burden sometimes, but also I got a very significant gift from
I got paid pretty well for it, kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's great.
So
I always remember Ron Blue. Do you know Ron Blue?
No.
He started a Christian-based financial planning firm here, and he did it nationally. He started it here, and then it went national. Okay, Ron Blue and Company. It's now since been bought out. Okay, but it's built on biblical principles in giving. And Ron has written a couple of, several books. He's a great speaker. He's now in his, he might be 80 by now. Okay, late 70s, 80. But he's a brilliant guy, and he always was known to say, "Do your giving while you're living." Okay, I never forgot that, and you certainly are a model of that.
Thank you.
That really struck me, especially when you said, "Let me." You were maybe prompted by the threat of a reduced exemption, but what you did is you did give that money, which was, I think that's just startling. That's great, and you trusted them, which is a lot.
I trusted them. I thought they were at the age where they could handle it. I haven't seen any of them buying Maseratis or doing foolish things. So or going on insane vacations. So I think it's working out pretty well. So in terms of managing our estate, the way we looked at it is, I think currently we each get approximately a $10 million estate exemption, where we could literally, if we were both to pass away today, $20 million could be given away to our families and our daughter, but anything above that would be taxed at something like 55%.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So the way we've done our estate planning essentially is to take a look at that and say, okay, whatever is the exemption we're going to give away. But above the exemption, which is more than half the estate, is going to go into this giving fund, which will be managed by, and my daughter sits on both of those.
So the half that you're going to, as you say, give away, that's giving it away to the family?
Yeah, the total of $20 million, okay?
That'll go to the family.
That will go to my daughter and her nieces and nephews, et cetera.
Yeah, there you go. Okay.
So
and then above the exemption, so you pay no tax, it's going to go into the giving fund.
It's going to go into the giving fund.
Got it.
And that way, no tax has to be paid. A large giving fund gets created, but giving is in our case of our daughter, it's not going to be giving; it's going to be doling out.
Yeah.
But you get the drift of how we're setting it up.
That is really cool. Well, let me end with this. You said something that I just want you to expand on, and that's how we're going to end this, okay? And that is, you said, being a philanthropist is the best job in the world.
Yes.
Talk about that at some depth.
Well, let me, I work better with examples. So
You're talking to entrepreneurs, right? These are guys that have been focused on making money all the time. Tell me how to jump you told me how you jumped the fence. Now tell me why it's so good on the other side of the fence. See, that's what I'm asking.
Well, I look at Catholic Charities and I see where we're at today as an organization and what we're able to do for the community because we have the budget that we have. And the budget we're going to have after this next meeting, I think, is going to be pretty mind-boggling. It's going to allow us to have our own building, which is something we wanted for decades. So you see that. But let me give it to you on a more specific level. So when we visited our daughter's sober living home, we ran across a young man whose dream was to be a helicopter pilot. But because he earlier in his life had a problem with alcohol, he got in trouble with the law. He couldn't get student loans. He couldn't get it. We paid for him to become an helicopter pilot. And also I mentored him in the process as well because he struggled. He didn't come from a family where there was a male leader to sort of help direct him and help pick him up when he was feeling down or discouraged. Well, he is now pursuing a career as a helicopter instructor, which is a whole level above being a pilot, and he has found his dream, and we helped him do that through our gift of paying for his education. Just this past May, we went to the graduation of the daughter of our Portuguese maid, who was a bright young woman who we financed her education through Georgia State University in Atlanta. She's just landed an amazing job with an IT firm in the Atlanta area, and her future is extremely bright. And so when we can see how we can impact other people's lives, I just can't explain the feeling. It's just wonderful to feel like, something. Maybe I was put on this planet for a reason after all.
So it is. I love that theme that you've had through this entire discussion, that your focus is on changed lives, not for the moment, but like you said, it's a hand up. These are changed lives that will then go on to change other lives, and my God, you are an inspiration, Greg. Thank you so much for sharing at such a detailed level and being so transparent. That's what makes this so rich, this conversation. You've been amazing. Thank you.
Well, I think you're a very good interviewer, and I've thoroughly enjoyed every single one of our sessions. So.
Oh, you have? Okay, good. Well, let me, I'll just hang around and I'll just say goodbye to everybody, and then we'll sign off together. Make sure that it's completely uploaded and we don't have any kind of a glitch on this thing. So just thanks for everybody. Thanks first to Greg for being here and for sharing his life, and for Mary and for sharing his life on behalf of Mary and their daughter. And thank you for attending. I hope that you will move from entrepreneur to philanthropist, and you will enjoy first the best job in the world, which is entrepreneur, and then the new best job in the world, which comes from the fruit of entrepreneurship, and that is philanthropy. Thanks for joining us. Take care.